Hello crochet friends, welcome to Crazy Cool Crochet. In this project we are working on the Icy Cool Crochet fur trimmed vest, and we are using for the body Loops and Threads Charisma Sorbet. It's a number 5 bulky and the color is Aqua. And then for the fur we are using Yarn Bee Fur the Love Mint, and that is a number 6 super bulky. We'll also be using a K-hook or a 6.5 millimeter, scissors, and the yarn needle. Now this project is really easy to work. This is a great project for beginners, and it works up really fast, especially because we're using the bulky yarn, but also because the stitches used are super simple. We're going to use a moss stitch, moss, M-O-S-S, and that just consists of single crochets and chains. Easy. This will also have a matching hat, which will be worked up in a separate tutorial, so be watching out for that. And of course I will leave a link in the bottom, the white space. It's called a description area, and to get to that area you need to click where it says show more, or I think on mobile devices it will show a little arrow next to the name Crazy Cool Crochet. It's all down in the white space, and what that does is open up a whole other section below the video, and that has all kinds of additional information, including sizing, dimensions, my social media links, the amount of yarn that was used, and it will also take you back to my blog crazycoolcrochet.com and my Etsy channel, where when it's ready, when the pattern is ready, the printable pattern will be available in my Etsy shop. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to start with a chain of 22. Now I like to start like this. I place the hook in front of the yarn and then I just twist all the way around. When you make your first chain, that locks in the stitch right here. So then you don't have to learn how to do any special slip knots. Okay, now before we proceed, if you need help with the absolute beginning stitches, the chains, the single crochets, I'll leave a box, a little white box right up above. Click on that. It will take you to the beginner tutorials. So for now, that was chain 1. We need 22. There's 2. Keep going for 22. Okay, now we are going to start the first single crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So not counting the chain on the hook, the first one is right below, and it usually shrinks up, so it looks really small, but that's the first one. 1, 2, 3, there's the 4th. We enter the hook into the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. You work your single crochet, and then you chain 1. Now we're going to skip the next chain, and into the next chain we will do that again. A single crochet, insert the hook into the chain, pull the yarn through for 2 loops on the hook, pull the yarn through both loops, that's a single crochet, and then chain 1, and then repeat. Skip the next chain, enter the hook into the next chain for a single crochet and a chain 1. So just repeat that all the way across. Okay, we're at the end of that first row, and we should have 10 single crochets. So there's the first one. And of course the last one goes into the last chain. Now before we proceed, I want to ask that you watch the video all the way through so that you see what's coming up ahead of you. If I have suggestions along the way, you will have those ready to go. Also, this is for a size small. Now for different sizes, you will need to go to the written description like I said before, and that will take you over to the blog. I usually have the written instructions in the blog, and if there's additional sizing, that will be there too. Now, if you are making the size small and you see this front panel looks really small, but we need to allow for 2 inches for the fur trim. So we'll have fur trim along the bottom and then fur trim along the center edge. Fur trim along the bottom will be smaller than the 2 inches in the center. So that was row 1. Now for row 2, we're at the end of row 1, and at the end of every row, we chain 2, and then we turn. Now we're going to do single crochet, chain 1, single crochet all the way across again. And we're going to start in that very first big space. We're working into those big spaces. So the first single crochet goes into that first big space, chain 1. Next single crochet into the next big space, chain 1, and keep going across. And you will have, again, 10 single crochets. Okay, now for the last single crochet, number 10, feel around with your fingers and make sure that you're going into the space. So between that last single crochet below and the turning chain, you'll have your space. You'll enter number 10, chain 2, and turn. And then just keep repeating until you have a total of 29 rows. Okay, so this is row 2 that we just completed, so you need a total of 29. Now, what I should have mentioned at the beginning, and this is why I say watch the video all the way through, use a fairly loose tension. It doesn't have to be super loose, but you don't want a tight tension on this. So if you typically have a tighter tension, loosen it up, but not so loose that it's messy. We don't need to do that. Okay, so just keep going. Single crochet into that first space, chain 1, single crochet into each space across. Okay, now we've completed the 29 rows. And we are on the right side. You can tell the right side because this is your foundation chain. There's that tail from the foundation chain. So that's the right side. So now we are going to, at the end of row 29, you chain 2 and turn as usual. And now we are going to continue in the pattern for 7 total single crochets. We are going to start shaping the armhole. Okay, so here we've got our 7 single crochets, and you do your chain 2 and turn, and now you continue in the pattern again. So now you're just doing the same thing, entering your single crochet and chain 1, single crochet, chain 1, all the way to the end. So now we're working with 7 single crochets. And you will continue in that pattern for a total, starting from the bottom, a total of 42 rows. Okay, we've completed that front panel. You can see where the underarm is shaping up. Now, you can, and I do strongly suggest, put this up against yourself if this is for you. And if you feel that you need more length, in case you're bustier in the front and you need this to be a little bit longer, just go ahead and add as many more rows as you think you need, probably 2 or 3. And you'll be good. And of course then for the next panel, just make sure you're matching up your rows. and for the back panel, which I'm going to show you in a minute. Now for the next panel, well, let's finish this off. Okay, so to finish it off, you did your last single crochet. I like to do 2 chains and then tie off the yarn or cut off the yarn. Leave a tail about 5 inches long. Just pull the yarn through and then squeeze the chains down, and that will give you a nice secure knot. And then at the end of the project we weave these in to hide them. Okay, so now for the next panel, you work it exactly the same. You start it exactly the same. Let me flip this over so that we're on the right side. Okay, so there's that tail on the right side. Okay, so there's the second panel. There's the right side. Now you'll notice that the underarms are where they should be, of course. But let me show you how we did that. So for this first panel, on row 30, we ended up starting our single crochet and then ending with your 7 single crochets, chain 2, turn, and then continuing. Now with the opposite side, we need to do that just a little bit different. So for this one, you completed row 29. Do not chain at the end of row 29. Do not do 2 chains. Just finish that last single crochet and then turn, and then you're going to slip stitch into the first 3. Since this is already done, let me show you on the back panel. It's the exact same process on the back panel. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the back panel. Okay, so for the back panel, you work it exactly the same as you did for the front panel, except of course it's one long continuous panel. And for this, we start with the foundation chain of 48 chains. And then you do the same thing where you start with the 4th chain from the hook, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, chain 1. You're just following the exact same pattern. So this is worked through row 29. Now at the end of row 29, you did your last single crochet. Now do not chain. Just do the single crochet and turn. So now this is the exact process you're going to use on that second front panel. So now we're going to slip stitch into the first 3 spaces. Okay, so to slip stitch, enter the hook into that big space, pull the yarn through, and just slide it right through that chain on the hook. That's a slip stitch. Now do the same thing in the next space. Put the hook through the big space, pull the yarn through, slide it right into that chain on the hook. Now make sure this is not too tight. Give yourself some room here to reach across to the next space. Okay, so that was 2. Now here comes the 3rd one. Slip stitch. 3 slip stitches. Now chain 2. And now we're going to enter the first single crochet into that next big space. And then chain 1, and then continue as normal. Single crochet in the next space, chain 1. Now let me show you the front panel so you can see it's worked exactly the same way. So you've got your 3 slip stitches. There's that chain 2, and then you enter into your first single crochet into the next space so that you've got 7 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the last one. Then chain 2, turn, and just continue in the pattern. So you'll enter into that first space. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7th one will go into here. So between the single crochet and the turning chain. So then when you're done with both of those panels, you'll be able to continue on with the back panel because it's the same pattern. Okay, so that back panel, the example that we were working on, you did your 3 slip stitches and then you continue across. And then I'll show you how to shape that second armhole. Okay, so you would have worked across to the last 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you entered your single crochet into that last space, chain 2, turn, and continue in the pattern. Enter your first single crochet in that first space as usual. Okay, when you're done with that second row, you'll enter that last single crochet into the space between the last single crochet below and the turning chain. And you'll have 17 single crochets that you're working with for the back panel. And for the main body, you would have been working with 23 single crochets. So then after you reduce it by 3 on each side, you end up working with 17 single crochets. So now just continue in these rows of 17 for a total of 42 rows, just like you did for the front panels. Total of 42 from the bottom to the end of the shoulder shaping. Okay, we've completed the 3 panels, back panel and the 2 front panels. Now we're going to seam the shoulders and the sides. So you want to be working on the wrong sides. So you've got the back panel with the front side, the right side is facing up. And then the right sides of the side panels look like that. So you've got the right sides touching each other. Wrong sides are up. The back and the front, wrong side is up. Now we're going to start with one panel. And we will seam across the top here for about 3 inches and then stop. Okay, so you're going to take your yarn needle with the length of yarn, leave the ends open, we start in the corner, so insert the hook into the yarn. You usually want to work with 2 strands, and then the same on the other side. Try to avoid going into, this time we don't want to go into the big holes. We want to work into the strands of yarn. And we're going to work with a whip stitch. Now I like to tie the end here. I double knot it. Now the tails do tend to get in the way, so excuse me in advance. Okay, so go ahead and go through both panels. Get the tails out of the way, and you can see where you formed like a loop. Okay, so now you're going to come back around. There's your loop that you're going to form. Okay, I'm going to leave this much open. Now we're going to finish this off. So just bring the yarn through a few stitches. And then knot it and tie it off. Okay, this is where we were working, so I'm going to cut that off. And then do the same on the other side. And then for the side panels, or the side seam, there's the bottom, there's the armhole. So you do the exact same thing. I like to start from the bottom and work my way up. So for this one, we do seam all the way to the armhole. And then do the same on the other side. And then we'll start with the fur trim. Now let's go ahead and do the fur trim. We'll be working on the right side, so turn this so the right side is facing. And use the same hook that you've been using. Alright, now to start with the fur trim, I'm going to start in one of the underarms, or one of the armholes I should say. And I start typically in the center of the armhole opening, the bottom. And you do have this right side facing up. So using the same size hook, just insert it. Bring in the fur yarn. Leave a tail. Bring the yarn through and then chain one. The way I'm going to do this is slip stitches around the armhole openings and slip stitches for the bottom. And then for the center and around the neck, I'm using single crochets. That'll give you a bigger border for the front. We're going to enter the hook as evenly spaced as possible. Now this one feels a little too close to where I just started, so I'm going to go into the next space. And we're slip stitching, so just bring the yarn through and then through the chain on the hook. Yes, it's impossible to see what you're doing. Okay, so pull up a good size loop and then go into the next space. Okay, so it looks like for this portion we can go into each space. So go all the way across, all the way around I should say. Okay, when we come back around to where we started, we're going to do a slip stitch into that first space. And then through the loop on the hook. And then do a chain. And now we're going to cut this off. Okay, let's go back on the wrong side. And where you can, see if you can bring the yarn through a loop of thread, of yarn. So this is an attempt to weave in the tail. And now I would knot it with a chain. Squeeze it down and then cut it off. Okay, so repeat on the other side. The rest of the border we are going to start, and it is important where we start this portion of it. The bottom. Okay, so here's the neck. And we're going to start on this corner and work our way around. So we're going to be working in slip stitches like we did for the arms. But when we get over here and we're going to work our way up the center, we're going to switch to single crochet. Okay, so let's start in the corner. Chain one, that locks it in, slip stitch into that first space, okay, now for this one, just for the sake of giving it a little more length, I am going to work into the chains rather than into the big spaces. See, this is again where, it's an art. It's not a science. Just because we worked into the big spaces elsewhere doesn't mean we have to do that for the whole project. Okay, now this time we do want to skip. So we're going to skip that next space, the next chain, and go into the next one. Otherwise it will be much too close together and too thick. So just work your way around. Okay, so now I made it back around, all the way around. And now I'm on the other panel, front panel. Now we're going to start going around the center border. So now in the corner, we're going to go ahead and do a single crochet. So I ended up with a slip stitch here. And now we're going to do a single crochet. And then work our way up the edge, up the center. Single crochets. Work your way up. Again, do what feels comfortable. If going into each space feels right, then go ahead and do that. If you want to skip the little spaces like this, that's okay. Just so that this is not getting tight. You don't want that to bunch up. Just make sure it's nice and loose. So that will depend on where you're entering. If you're entering in every space or every other space, or skip here and there a space. So go all the way around the neck, and back down the other side. Okay, now I'm back to the end of that border. There's the neck, came down around the front. Now, you'll want to close up this little gap here, inserting the hook into that very starting chain where you were working the slip stitches along the bottom. Okay, so slip stitch to join it. Easier said than done with this yarn. Okay, now chain one, and we are going to turn the work. So now we're going to work another row of single crochet. So you're going to feel your way with your fingers to find the spaces. It's actually pretty intuitive. Make sure you're giving yourself a lot of space, a lot of room, with some nice fat loops. Nice and roomy. Okay, so work your way all the way back around to the other side. Okay, now I'm at the end of that second row. I'm going to slip stitch into that corner. And then bring the yarn through with a chain and then cut it off. Bring it through that chain, tighten it down, and then you'll bring it through to hide that tail. Wherever you can. There's the completed vest. If you wanted to, you can do the single crochets on the bottom or on the arms and make that fur trim a little bit wider, the way it is for the front. Totally up to you. Okay, so hope you like this. And if you are looking for the hat, I will go ahead and either, well, I'll definitely leave a link in the description area, or I'll try to leave a link to the actual video at the end of this one. Okay, see you in the next pattern. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe. I could really use your help, guys. As I often say, this is my only source of income. So every little bit helps. Your support is so very much appreciated. Thank you.